Good morning, everybody. We have a great show coming your way today. Football returned last night, and it was a game of inches. I'm talking toes. We will talk about how the Chiefs held on for the win despite some last-minute theatrics from the Ravens. Plus, Friday night fight, ? We have football on Friday for the first time since the 70s. We will break down Eagles, Packers in Brazil, plus a full weekend of college football and NFL coming our way. What did we do to deserve this? I don't know, but we'll do a show coming up on GoJo Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield back in Boston. I am coming to you guys live from Reno, Nevada, ahead of Georgia Southern Nevada, and we're going to get a great show for you guys today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review it, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on the DraftKings Network, where you probably watched our kickoff in Kansas City yesterday. Thank you to everyone who helped put that on, everybody who checked that out. We had a great time with it, and we're going to keep it rolling into today because we got a full slate of NFL games now coming up this weekend. We got Friday night NFL. Peter Keating from the Underdog Fantasy Show is going to join us and take a look ahead at that, as well as the college slate this weekend. But, Dad, once again, shoe sizes. Who knew? Coming down and determining so much in the NFL between picking a different color of cleats or picking a different shoe size. What would you say would have been more effective for Isaiah Likely as the Baltimore Ravens lose in the most gut-wrenching fashion possible to open up the NFL season?
Well, I don't think he could have had smaller shoes because then his feet would have hurt, and it would have hurt running routes. I think going with the white cleats may have been the way to go. For those that didn't see it or are going to see it in highlights, let's start at the end. And I'll say this: I'm glad it was not live. It looked like a touchdown. I thought it was a touchdown, but I'm glad replay was definitive, and it was definitive. There can be no argument that his toe was out of bounds, and I'm glad of that. I'm glad it still wasn't that close. Was it a blade of grass where there was still some controversy? That it actually was. He was out of bounds. But what an incredible game! This was kind of reverse from yardage and time of possession and plays from the AFC Championship game. In that game, Kansas City held the ball for like 37 minutes, had 70-some plays to 50-some for Baltimore. This time it was reversed, where Baltimore had the ball for 74 plays and almost 34 minutes, yet they still lost by 7 in both games, 17-10 last year and 27-10 this year. But it came down to an exciting finish. There will be questions, without a doubt, about Lamar Jackson. Can he keep up the pace that he kept up? 16 carries for 122 yards, scrambling out of his mind. Some were direct runs, but most was him just making stuff up on his own, something that he does incredibly well and frustrates the hell out of defenses. But, the talk from both teams was basically, we'll see you in the playoffs. But there's a long time before that happens, between now and then. And that's probably my biggest question, Mike, is Lamar Jackson, 26 of 41 at 15 incompletions, 273 yards, 16 carries, 122 yards. Can he carry that burden for the entire season?
Yeah, I think a lot of this screamed of crime of necessity right now, considering what we saw show up early and often, and what we talked about a lot in the lead up to this game. New offensive line in a lot of spots. Daniel Faalele met Chris Jones very early in this game. They rotated the right tackle, and as soon as Roger Rosengarten got into the game, he basically just took time going and finding whichever offensive lineman he wanted to go and match up with, and then beating them handily. And so you saw the play calling, I think, from Todd Monken was reflected in that. And then I think for Lamar Jackson, getting the ball out early, 6.7 yards per attempt last night, compared with Mahomes up over 10 yards. It was low and slow, and Lamar's legs had to get them out of a lot of problems that I just don't think their offensive line this early in the season was ready to get them out of. So I worry less about that. What about you?
And he did have a tight end to bail him out. It just wasn't Mark Andrews, still coming off the injury from last year that took away the latter part of his season. It was Isaiah Likely, 9 catches for 111 yards and a sweet touchdown and a nice little stop-and-go move toward the end zone. So he did have his, for lack of a better term, security blanket in Likely. It just wasn't Mark Andrews, where for the offense for Kansas City, it was more wide open. Rashee Rice just picking up where he left off, especially on those slant routes, yards after the catch. Xavier Worthy, 3 touches and 2 touchdowns. So they were big hitting, and Baltimore was kind of more methodical with Lamar kind of doing the dirty work in scrambling. Let me ask you, I mean, we know it because we both play football. We kind of know what was going on. But just as an old lineman, explain, because the last two plays where Lamar was throwing into the end zone, didn't see Zay Flowers, was throwing to Bateman on the one, and then the thought touchdown that wasn't a touchdown to Likely. On both those plays, Chris Jones was at left end, and he ended up on Justice Hill, the running back. And all Kansas City did was walk up a linebacker to be in front of the right tackle. It still was a 4-man rush. The linebacker dropped out. But even if he stayed, wouldn't you slide the way of Chris Jones to have a tackle, at least a big body on Chris Jones? Those 2 plays, and Lamar knew it. Lamar saw Chris Jones on Justice Hill and knew he was going to have to scamper.
Yeah, no idea how that happens. Can't happen, shouldn't happen. Like, Chris Jones is the one you've got to find on each and every play. So whatever they're going to say their protection plan was, it's bad if it winds up with Justice Hill as the one on Chris Jones. Honestly, Justice Hill actually did a pretty fair job. The thing that surprised me most about that, Rep Dad, and you can talk to me on this, is Chris Jones sees a running back 2 straight reps, and I'm sure is somewhat surprised, being that he's Chris Jones. Yeah. He's, again, spent so much of the night. There was that rep where he walked over right at the last minute and just pointed to Daniel Faalele before the snap, as he said, this is going to be the guy I go after on this rep, and then did it. And kind of, I mean, presented a difficult look there. But here, he's probably surprised that a running back is coming to block him. I'm sure he would be. But the fact that he sort of like stuttered and then tried to go around him instead of putting him right in Lamar Jackson's lap on that play stunned me.
I was surprised as well. It's almost like he was wondering where Pat was going to escape, instead of just a straight line through Justice Hill to Patrick Mahomes. And then he kind of hesitated and went around him. And Lamar Jackson, and Lamar is able to just step up and go around. I was surprised at that as well, and probably not as surprised as Chris Jones. Maybe on the second play more than the first. Like, wait, 2 in a row? You're going to put a back on me? But you're right. That should not happen. It was a 4-man rush. All they did was walk up a linebacker. You just can't have that in protection. But I agree with you. Justice Hill, for that matchup, did a pretty damn good job.
Did about all you could ask of a running back in that position, considering, again, and I think this was reflected in something we saw with the Chiefs game plan, where we talked about last year in the AFC Championship game. They blitzed Lamar Jackson on just under 45% of their plays, which was the third highest rate that Lamar had been blitzed last season, and he had his 3rd lowest quarterback rating because of that. Last night, that blitz percentage dropped to about 23%. So Spags and that Chiefs defense realizing, hey, while this Ravens offensive line has some new parts, we can afford to go a little bit more 4-man rush, help out our secondary that, listen, had guys step up last night, but losing L'Jarius Sneed for them on the back end, still something big enough for them to have to account for. And then they were still able to bother Lamar enough to where at some point, Dad, I think you just saw the switch flip with Lamar, where he said, hey, tonight's going to have to be one of those nights where I do a little bit of everything to bail the guys out right now. Derrick Henry got a lot of touches in the first drive. I think we saw more touches for him in the first drive, more carries than we almost saw the entire AFC Championship game, which I'm sure only made Baltimore fans want to die a little bit inside. But then after that, Dad, to me, this entire ordeal with them, because I don't know where you were, like, we go back to the end where we kind of started on this one. How much did you put on Lamar Jackson missing that throw to Isaiah Likely where he ended up going down for a few on a couple of plays before the final play, missing that throw through the back of the end zone where it looked like him and Isaiah Likely just sort of caught between worlds there. Like you said, maybe he was looking at another receiver and Rashad Bateman there, but those are going to be the plays I feel like people are going to focus on this morning as, hey, I understand you're under duress. I understand that you have been really saving this team's ass the whole night. But again, we talked about it with Stu Gatz the other day. The way Baltimore is going to be judged based on everything they've already done is, hey, if you want to beat this team, especially with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, you're going to have to make those plays when you've got a receiver wide open in the end zone with a chance to win it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's a quarterback who can throw from the pocket, but he also can deliver on the run because we see him scramble to run and be a dangerous runner or throw after escaping the pocket. So it's not like he's not used to doing that. The Zay Flowers, and listen, he admitted it. He flat out admitted it. I didn't see him. He said, I was throwing to Bateman. He said if I'd have held the ball another beat, and he could have held the ball another beat because he did escape that rush from Chris Jones on Justice Hill, that he would have saw Zay Flowers. It would have been an easy touchdown. I mean, that was one, that obviously he'd love to pull the string and have back. That was the one that was more obvious because Zay Flowers ended up open in the end zone, in between players. I mean, wide open. The last throw, the one where Likely was hurt in the corner of the end zone, that throw was just a little too high. And then the throw to Likely in the back of the end zone, I mean, what are you going to do? It's a matter of an inch and a half, 2 inches. I mean, it's tough to say I want that one back because he had to go up high over the coverage, and it's tough to blame either one of them for a play you're trying to make. It's the Zay Flowers one where he said, and he admitted, I needed to hold the ball for another beat. And he would have seen Zay. It would have been an easy touchdown. And, oh, by the way, even when Likely thought they scored a touchdown, if it was Zay Flowers, they were going for 2. John Harbaugh did not hesitate. He said, we're going for 2. They were going for the win on the road. They had the momentum. They were just going to line up and go for 2 and either win or lose it on one play.
I do appreciate John Harbaugh still bringing that textbook aggressiveness to this season. We remember early in the game they had the 4th and 1 that ultimately they called the play where they tried to hide Zay Flowers in the backfield, and Kansas City's secondary did a good job of sniffing that out. I don't know if I loved the play call, loved the decision, but I was all aboard that train, Dad. Team of the visiting team on the road against the 2-time defending Super Bowl champs that have been one of your hangups now as we look at this Baltimore Ravens team and the success they've had versus everybody else versus not against this Kansas City Chiefs squad. I love the idea that they were already getting ready to go win it. It seems very much a part of their DNA. Overall in this game, Dad, on the Baltimore side, before we visit Kansas City and now how we look at this team's opening stanza as a way to maybe forecast if they really can do this three-peat thing now that we've got a little bit of a data point. For Baltimore, how concerned are you about that offensive line limiting the offensive progress that we saw from last season?
Well, I mean, listen, it's going to take time to gel. Go to the college level. We talked about Notre Dame having a unit of 5 that had 6 starts between them and going in and just kind of holding their own against a very good Texas A&M defensive line and how they'll grow. I would expect basically the same thing here to grow together. What you have to benefit you, just like we talked about with Notre Dame, is you have Riley Leonard who can escape. And here, multiply that by 1,000. You have Lamar Jackson who can escape and who can do things on their own. The rushing total is a little skewed for Baltimore. They had 185 yards rushing, average over 5 yards a rush. But 122 of those were Lamar and not on planned runs. That was him just doing Lamar Jackson things, which, again, as a former D lineman, frustrates the hell out of you when you get a rush. Kansas City had 1 sack in this game. Chris Jones had a sack, caused a fumble. But they did get pressure on Lamar. They definitely got pressure, but he is a tough guy to bring down. And I never believed in the spy. You can't spy a guy like Lamar. You're going to miss him one-on-one, and you're just wasting a guy that could be in coverage. So I think the rushing yards are a little skewed. I kind of like what Isaiah Likely said. After the game. I think we have that of what Isaiah likely said after the game about this matchup and maybe a matchup in the future.
this point, it's just you got to live with the call. I mean, you got to look on, obviously watch the film, see what we could do better to not put ourselves in a situation where, to leave in the ref's hands to be able to call that call and call the game. So, all I say is just watch the film, see what we can improve on, and go into next week. I'd say this is probably the worst game we're going to play all year. So if this is their best that they got, I mean, good luck in the postseason.
Oh,
Isaiah
I like that,
feeling
huh?
himself after that Olay touchdown there. And listen, this Baltimore team's not shy on confidence. They take their cues from Lamar Jackson on that front. So I don't have any issue with that. But listen, until further notice, you got to beat the Chiefs for us to actually believe that talk is anything more than talk right now. Dad, I don't want to get out of this first segment, though, without asking, because he mentioned the calls there. But I think part of the story from last night was the ref show that we got at the beginning of this game. So many calls on Ravens offensive tackle Ronnie Stanley for the illegal procedure penalties of that game that completely messed with the game flow, that hijacked the beginning of this game, that I thought, quite honestly, I get point of emphasis from the league. It happens at the beginning of every year where, for anyone that's unfamiliar, the league will literally send out a memo of these are the things that we are reinforcing this year in terms of the penalty calls. And we see all the time when it was defensive pass interference or defensive holding. The first quarter of the season is littered with flags. But, Dad, so many of these, especially when you compared it to the other side where Jawan Taylor, we know, was the star of this show last year for the Chiefs, who was often getting off right at the snap count and was again last night getting some of that home field advantage of being able to time the count with Patrick Mahomes. I thought some of that with Ronnie at a certain point got to be a bit ridiculous with these officials for fouls that were ultimately pretty ticky-tacky. And to the Ravens' frustration said, this was not how it was communicated to us when we brought the officials out, like a lot of teams do during camp, to go over this stuff and try and make sure we got a handle on it heading for the season. So I thought the refs overstepped last night. What about you?
I think that the Ravens had 7 penalties. I think 5 of them were alignment. For those that don't know what we're talking about, the linemen, when they're in that 2-point stance, like in a pass blocking situation, their helmet has to be past the waistline of the center. They have to be past that. They can't be behind the center's butt. But the one thing I'll say, Mike, is they did make it a point of emphasis. And if Ronnie wasn't adjusting, or maybe he was adjusting so minutely that they didn't think it was enough. And I heard Chris Collinsworth say that they warned them first. So in actuality, they got 2 extras where they were warned actually twice, once for each tackle, and then still called, I believe, 5 times. And that's just, it's whether fair or not. And I get why you're saying it's unfair, because it looked like it looked like he was right in the area of where he should be. But you have to adjust. You if they're going to call it, you have to adjust to it. And I know that the linemen are trying to stay back to get an extra jump on the D lineman that's coming after him. And it's a fine line. I mean, it is just like the toe on the out of bounds. It's a matter of actual inches of that helmet breaking the waistline of the center.
Yeah, it was something that I guess the unfortunate part of it was it just felt like it took over a lot of the beginning of this game. And the rest of this game was so good. Like, in terms of what you want out of an opening night for the NFL's football season, you couldn't ask for better than that. Both of these teams trading blows at certain points. Isaiah Likely, where Mark Andrews, I'm sure we're probably never going to get the full extent of how much that car accident affected the start of his season, but there's no doubt that he just did not quite look himself that night. And Isaiah Likely, the benefit of all those tight end 1 reps last year, certainly jumped off the page. He looked confident. And, Dad, that touchdown that he had with the run after catch looked like the kind of ESP between quarterback and player that we've honestly seen from Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce on the other side for so many years.
They have a legitimate 2 tight end threat. And speaking of tight ends, there wasn't much. There was the one escape pass down the field on a 3rd and 12 to Travis Kelce, but Travis had 3 catches for 30-some yards, I think. It was Rashee Rice early in that game, and it was Xavier Worthy with 2 big receptions and 1 big run. Wow, did he show off his speed.
I was going to say, I understand he's not going to Canton just based off getting that in a catch against the blown coverage, but if your jaw didn't drop a little bit seeing him kick on the burners on that reverse, then, buddy, you just might not have a pulse. Football was so back in that moment, baby.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. So after last night, we are one game down, 271 to go. So let's move on to game number 2. Down in Brazil, Packers and Eagles. Eagles 2-point favorites and designated home team. But one Eagle has some reservations, shall we say, about the venue. Fans of Brazil were not happy with Darius Slay's comments this week.
Week 1, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait. But, man, I do not want to go to Brazil. You want to know why? I'm here to tell you why. They already told us not to leave the hotel. They told us we can't do too much going on because the crime rate is crazy. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, NFL, why y'all want to send us somewhere with the crime rate this high? And like, we out the country. So, you know, the first thing people think is, like, something terrible can possibly happen. I told my family, do not come down there because, like, I'm not going to be nowhere to be found. Really, I'm going to be in a hotel, chilling, minding my business, playing my game.
And, of course, Darius Slayton got pulled into the drama. He said, "Dear people of Brazil, my name is Darius Slayton. I play wide receiver for the Giants. I am innocent." You guys, this is pretty funny to me because Twitter is banned in Brazil, so nobody's seeing any of this.
Yes.
I'm
yes,
like,
exactly. Well,
the
I understand
irony,
Darius
like,
Slayton's move here. You're shouting into the void, which is honestly how most of us should feel on that website anyway. But Darius Slay, I think this was on his podcast, and this is just another reminder, the danger of podcasting.
Yeah.
I don't know if you get this. Every time I do a podcast, I come off it with an anxiety of like, oh, did I say too much? Did I get too comfortable there? Darius Slay got too comfortable here and started saying the quiet part very loud, which we had seen reflected, Dad, in other players that had talked about their experience down in Brazil. And you know this with teams and the way they sell this is, as someone, I remember I went to play in the Sun Bowl in El Paso, Texas, and we got the full scare treatment of this is what will happen if you go to Juarez, which is right across the border where
Right.
you are in El Paso for that game. They wanted to make good and damn sure we thought long and hard about any of the potential consequences, sell us the worst of it so that they can minimize the risk on their side of a player going and doing something somewhere dumb, even if the risk isn't as severe as they sell you. And so I'm sure NFL security, Eagle security did a lot of that same stuff here in the name of keeping their players away from trying to get into too much while they're out on foreign soil.
Well, you know, I get the NFL trying to be worldwide. Again, I don't think they will ever have a division or a team outside of the United States. The Sun Bowl is every year, right? So you're going to get that warning every year. The NFL is choosing to go to these places and choosing to go to a place where they're literally telling the players, don't leave the hotel. There are plenty of places in the world to play football. And I'm not sure why, if in fact all these reports are true, that you would pick a place to, and I know Brazil obviously is unbelievably popular in soccer, and we get that, but to go to a place where knowingly you are telling the players, stay in the hotel, don't go out, just stay with your team, I quite honestly don't know how much sense that makes. I don't. If, in fact, the reports are true that they're saying stay in the hotel, don't go anywhere.
Well, I mean, Dad, this is, again, the NFL is going to get into markets at any cost. We saw this happen with the game. Weren't you supposed to call the one in Mexico City that they almost had to move because of the quality of the field?
I did. I did call a game in Mexico City last year. And I get it. They've called a few games here. This is the first one in Brazil. And I get it. The big machine is going to win, always. And no matter what position it puts the little people, in this case the players, in, the big machine is going to win. They're going to play where they want to play. And I'm sure it's going to be sold out, and I'm sure it's going to be unbelievably popular. But you hate to, and I will continue to emphasize, if the reports are true, you hate to put your people in any kind of predicaments.
Certainly there. So, that was an interesting ruffling of feathers in the lead up to this by Darius Slay, who has other things to worry about going into this game, Dad, namely the Packers receiving core. So with that in mind, as we look at this matchup of an Eagles team trying to rebound from last year, who was plummeting at the end of last season, and a Green Bay team whose stock couldn't have been soaring higher from week 9 on last year, where they became one of the best offenses in the NFL, which matchup it can be, position on position, player on player, are you most excited to watch in this game?
Oh, this is the Philly DBs against the Green Bay wide receivers, of which there may not be a clear number one, but so what? I mean, so what? You got Reed, you got Watson, you got Dobbs, you got Wicks, you got 2 tight ends that you can throw to as well. I mean, the weapons Jordan Love has, I mean, again, you don't need a number one. So we know what position the Philadelphia Eagle linebacker position was in last year by not spending money on any backers. And then you had backers hurt, and you're having backers that aren't really living up right now. You had injuries in the secondary. You try to rectify all that this year, but this is going to be a big test for him because Jordan Love can spread the ball around. And then you lose Aaron Jones, but you pick up Josh Jacobs. So I think that's kind of a wash. But you do have a running threat in Josh Jacobs. So that, to me, you're gonna put the pressure on the D line. Bryce Huff going to Philly, the interior guys of Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. What kind of push can they get in the middle to hurry Jordan Love? But that's the matchup I'm looking forward to, is the array of receivers that Jordan Love has against the linebackers and secondary of the Eagles, which has to show vast improvement from last year.
I know. Excited to see Quinyon Mitchell, their rookie out of Toledo, who was an incredible player there, was a reason he was one of their top picks. So young guys, especially having to show up early for that group against the youngest receiving core that we saw in last year in skill group from the Green Bay Packers. But Dad, especially after the way that last night went, I'm really hyper-focused on the lines of scrimmage here, because on both of these sides, you've got the Green Bay Packers, whose offensive line brings back 4 of their 5 starters last year, and they allowed the 3rd lowest pressure rate at 29.7% in the NFL last season in protecting Jordan Love. They had Jordan Morgan, another rookie at right guard, who was a tackle in college at Arizona, who's going to kick inside. But then on the other side for Eagles, life after Jason Kelce. Like, what is that going to look like? This new look offense for them? What are they going to prioritize there? It's still Jeff Stoutland, the offensive line coach, who I'm sure has a heavy say in what a lot of the runs they're going to call look like with this group and what they're still comfortable with. But how does that group, married with Saquon Barkley, pay dividends for an Eagles team that's still super talented everywhere, but is trying to kind of reset their identity on offense with Kellen Moore as the play caller? I think it starts with that group up front. And Saquon Barkley, Dad, I saw Dominique Foxworth the other day say on one of the shows on ESPN that he believes that Saquon Barkley could have a Christian McCaffrey-like role in that offense. Do you believe he's capable of that?
Yes. I mean, I don't know capable to the numbers CMC has, though. We'll see how Christian starts the year. He already has Achilles and calf issues going on. But yes, I absolutely see Saquon running the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield. I absolutely see him that way. And I think that will help the O-line with Cam Jurgens going to center. Now, he's had plenty of playing time, but he's not Jason Kelce. And you're dealing with Kenny Clark in the middle of that D-line, along with Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith at ends. But Kenny Clark's a hell of a stud on the inside. So that will be a test. But I do think Saquon Barkley, we talk about all the players that move teams. I think he could have one of the bigger production outings for the year on what he can do between running the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield, because you have receivers obviously and a tight end in Philly. But man, if they're you got the separate or spreading the defense out, you hit Saquon in the flat in open space. I think he is going to be a huge pickup for Philadelphia.
I think that's a great point, especially coming off last night where I saw Nate Tice over at Yahoo make the point that one of the biggest areas that the Chiefs benefited from Xavier Worthy wasn't just being able to go deep. It was the fact that he created so much space in the middle of the field, and that's where you saw them exploit some of that with Rashee Rice. So the same thing can be true for Philadelphia, where, more aggressive defense from Green Bay. Jeff Hafley letting those guys come up and play ball a little bit on the outside. But with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, can you create that space in the middle for Saquon Barkley coming over in his first game in Philadelphia? Coming up next, let's take a swerve and detour to college football's big weekend and the marquee matchup between Texas and Michigan next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. And this college football season, we are feeling the cheesiest with Cheez-Its. And so is Cooper Manning, apparently, you guys. Word on the street is that he paid to have the Texas flag outside the Graduate Hotel near Ann Arbor. And Wolverines fans are predictably not happy about that one. So, guys, this is a precursor to the biggest game of the weekend, of course, tomorrow at 12. Who do we think comes away with the W in this? Is this flag flying in Ann Arbor like an omen of what's to come?
Man, let me tell you what, Texas really might be feeling back in a way that I wasn't prepared for. If they're flying, let's put it this way, Dad. After last year, I can understand Texas once again brandishing this level of confidence. And unlike their counterpart, the Michigan Wolverines, who also, not only made the college football playoff but won the damn thing, Texas brought back their quarterback and they brought back the majority of their offensive line. And Michigan can lay claim to none of those things. And they showed those struggles last week with Fresno State. So I think that Texas is right to be confident going into this game. I think you look at this matchup, they're heavily favored for a reason. And so I would take Texas in this one, Dad. And I know I think I'm agreeing with you on this from yesterday. Take Texas in the points because this is a game where I don't know if it's going to be like a 20-point blowout like I think Fitz was talking about. But I do think Texas, we saw week one. I get the opponent. They've got speed to burn in an offense that's always been good at manufacturing hits, and they've got the quarterback with the arm to go and get those guys to rock early and often. So I think this is a lot like Georgia versus Clemson week 1, where Michigan's got a very good defense. But I think after a while, the fact that you're not going to be playing great complementary football catches up to everyone, and I think that's when Texas can start to pull away and win by more than that 7-point margin.
So first on the flag, and Cooper Manning, for those who don't know, is the father of Arch Manning, the backup quarterback at Texas. This is so college, right? I mean, I love it. I mean, this is just 100% college to pull a stunt like this and have the home team fans get mad at it. I think it's great. And listen, I played in the big house. You played in the big house. It is crazy there. I mean, it is just amazing the amount of people and what that town turns into. But I think Texas just will end up overwhelming them with Quinn Ewers hit what? And again, it was Colorado State, but 10 different receivers caught a ball in the first half. You mentioned 4 starters were back from that O-line. The new guy, Cameron Williams, was named SEC's co-offensive lineman of the week. So the new lineman was co-offensive lineman of the week, to go along with the 4 other starters. They always have speed at wide receiver. You do. The O-line will get tested. You do have Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant up front for Michigan. And obviously, Quinn Ewers throwing the ball. You have Will Johnson at DB for Michigan. But I just think they don't have enough experience at quarterback, playing 2 quarterback in Warren and Orji. I just think while the Michigan defense is always tough, it'll start competitively. I think just like you said, like Georgia and Clemson, that Texas will just wear on them and wear on them and wear on them. And this would be a double-digit win for Texas, I believe.
Yeah, this is going to have to be one of those games where if you're Michigan on the other side, that running game's got to come alive more, and you're dealing with a whole hockey line change group up front on offense that's going to have to try and take advantage of a Texas defense that's a little bit lighter in the ass in the middle with less quality there in the D-tackle room, but still plenty of talent to burn there. So from there, Jesse, let's go to our next game here. Tennessee, all of a sudden, starting to light some fires for the people.
Yeah, they're visiting Raleigh as 10-point favorites on Saturday for the Duke's Mayo Classic. Hands up, everybody. The only other matchup this weekend between ranked opponents. So can the Wolfpack pull off the home upset? What do we think? Is the Mayo flowing in their veins?
Dad, this is one, I mean, if you're going strictly off week 1 vibes on this one, Tennessee -10 is the play. That offense was a shredder, again, against lesser quality opponents. But then North Carolina State with Grayson McCall at the helm, who looked fine, and the offense came alive enough late. But that was a close game against Western Carolina for way too long for my comfort for this team that, especially, defensively, what's been the hallmark for NC State, that linebacker room that's been the face of that program, you could argue, in recent years, finally loses that last bit of it last year in Peyton, and now all of a sudden is dealing with a lot new group there that just overall did not impress me much last week. So, Dad, I'm inclined to lay the 10 here. This Tennessee offense with Nico Imaliva seems like it could be a real shredder. And listen, we know Josh Heupel's capable of this. We saw it a couple of years ago with Hendon Hooker, and it seems like he might be able to get them even a step further.
Yeah, Lamaliva, 314 yards in the first half. Now, again, it was against Chattanooga. It's tough to take a lot from the first games on big wins. But as we talked about, North Carolina State, I believe, was losing their game going into the fourth quarter. So, and Josh Heupel is known for outscoring big time his opponents in the first quarter. So this could take North Carolina State out of their game plan early. If Tennessee jumps on them early, gets a double-digit lead early, it could take North Carolina State, like I said, out of their offensive game plan. And the sooner you do that, the quicker you're going to be into trouble. So I even though this is a ranked, I do like Tennessee. I like the explosiveness of their offense in this.
Yeah, NC State's had somewhat of a big game problem themselves over the years, getting into some critical moments like this. And so, with the eyes on them in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, the premier kickoff event of college football season that we get in week 2 now, look at God, won't he do it? I think we'll both roll with the Vols. So, a lot of orange so far this morning in the games, Jesse. So, let's get to some different colors here and look at the last big matchup of the weekend.
Yeah, Oregon hosting Boise State after that lackluster win against Idaho. So, how much does Oregon have to show you in this one for you to feel confident in them?
Yeah, Dad, this is a weird game. Oregon was on the verge of going up 3 touchdowns before a strip sack at the end of the first half kind of changed the tenor of this game. And it just overall, I was impressed more so, I think, by Idaho's defensive line that gave a group in Oregon that returned plenty of starters on a good offensive line from last season, gave them everything they could handle there. This Boise State team got in a shootout last weekend with Georgia Southern. They gave up a lot on defense. But man, Dad, the story in this one is going to be, what is Oregon going to do to reckon with Ashton Jeanty, who had those 6 touchdowns last week and announced himself with authority in the Heisman Trophy conversation for one of the guys from the Group of 5 schools that's a favorite to potentially represent the Group of 5 in the college football playoff, but should absolutely be a guy mentioned as we talk about that award in the early going for this season. So who do you got in this one?
Well, this is going to be a high-scoring affair. Even though Oregon was slow against Idaho, they had the explosiveness to put up points. And this unfortunately, this Boise State defense has a propensity to give up points, and they're going to give up points like they did last week. So for Boise State, it's about Jeanty. It's about him running the ball. Running the ball controls the clock. And now still, it was a high-scoring affair that they won last week, so it didn't control it enough for that Boise State defense to give up some quicker touchdowns. So I think this is going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think Oregon kind of rights their ship a little bit in this one. They were one of the letdowns. They won but dropped, I think, 4 spots in the rankings, probably deservedly so because they just didn't look good. Give credit to Idaho for what that defense did against this Oregon offense. But you see improvement between the first and the second week, and I think you'll see it in that offense, the explosiveness from the Oregon offense. It's just a matter of Boise can control the ball with Jeanty and running the ball. But I like Oregon in this one to get the win. And they've played 3 times, and Boise State has won all 3. The last time they played in 08, 09, and 2017. So it has nothing to do with the 2 teams on the field for this game. So I do like Oregon in this one.
Yeah, I do too. I don't know if 21.5 is a little bit too rich for my taste just because I've got respect for Ashton Jeanty, but man, part of me feels like, Dad, this Oregon team with Dan Lanning, as great a motivator as there is in the sport, coming off a week 1 where they were a little bit embarrassed. Maybe you get to go back and tell them we were reading our press clippings too much. However they want to spin it, I do have a feeling they're going to come out and try and make a statement against the team in Boise State that really feels like the sexy pick coming off last week. So I'm with you. I think Oregon gets this done, and I think there's a chance they open this thing up quite a bit to try and make a point that no, what you saw in week 1 is an outlier, and the improvement that we always talk about between week 1 and week 2 is going to be seismic there. So that will be the look ahead at our college football, very cheesy slate for this weekend. Coming up next, let's go back to the NFL and look at some next-gen studs.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. here, and let's get statistical, fellas. Okay, with the help of Next Gen Stats, we put together a list of guys that we're hoping will have big games and big overall years. A little treat for you people out there watching, perhaps to help you build your DraftKings Millie Maker lineup. I don't know, that's what we do. We just hand out little treats to you. So, fellas, let me know how you see these guys performing this weekend and for the season. Let's start with George Pickens, okay? A lot of chatter in the offseason about Wilson and the Steelers' offense, and Pickens did average the second lowest average target separation on the team last year at 2.3 yards. He was second on the team in yards after the catch. So what do we think, guys? Maybe Arthur Smith finds a way to get Pickens the ball in space. What do we think about his year?
Yeah, Dan, I always said this was one going back to the offseason when we heard that both of these quarterbacks in particular, and I reinforce both because we got the reports earlier this week that Russell Wilson was again dealing with some calf tightness. That was the thing that kept him out at the beginning of training camp and gave Justin Fields a chance. That no matter who was going to be under center, both of these quarterbacks, especially recently in the NFL, had made their living throwing the ball deep and outside the numbers, the exact spot where George Pickens was always going to thrive. So while losing Deontay Johnson, unfortunately, means that there's going to be less for others to worry about outside of Pat Freiermuth and George Pickens in that offense, I still do think that he's been a great contested catch guy. And with both of these quarterbacks, yeah, he was always in line for a jump in production based on what these guys did well.
Yeah, and just the change in quarterback is going to help the situation. Yeah. And against Atlanta's defense, you pick up Justin Simmons at safety. Jesse Bates has been there for a year. AJ Terrell at the corner. So and Raheem Morris as a defensive coach, I expect that defense, which was 30th in the league last year, defending against the deep pass, I would expect that to improve. But we know Russell Wilson is one of the best deep ball passers I have seen in football. Absolutely no doubt about that. While his game has certainly been tampered down over the last couple of years, he's not been playing like the Russell Wilson we saw in Seattle. His deep ball ability, normally after escaping the pocket, has been pretty spectacular. So, but we know also Arthur Smith wants to run the ball, so we'll see how much the split is of run pass to try and get Pickens involved.
Yeah, Falcons' deep passing defense was 30th in the NFL last year, according to Next Gen Stats. So obviously they went out and tried to remedy to that this offseason with the Justin Simmons signing to go with Jesse Bates in the back end of that team as well, but would still benefit you to go there early and often, Dad, to try and soften it up, because the one thing we did see with this team in the preseason, and I get small sample sizes, the offensive line for the Steelers is going to be a work in progress here at the beginning. Lots of new parts, lots of young parts, and against some better groups, which, the Falcons will see. Again, brought in Matthew Judon. They're trying in Atlanta for a group that wasn't great last year. That's going to be a group in Pittsburgh up front that's got to prove it to me in the early going here. What else we got next, Jesse?
Yeah, how about Jackson Smith-Njigba? So he was averaging 3.8 yards of separation last year. He goes up against a Denver defense that was last in passing defense against the play action and 27th in overall passing efficiency. How do we feel about him this week?
I feel good about him, Dad, overall in the fit in this offense. I've said it's something that I'm excited to see actually play out in reality, because on paper, it couldn't have been a better transition for Ryan Grubb coming from Washington and going to Seattle, given the fact that they are this deep in the receiver room. And you looked last year that outside of in Washington back in college, and I understand it's a totally different world, but the receivers that you had there with Jalen Polk and Rome Odunze as the 1 and 2, but then also allowed for some of the tertiary guys like Jalen McMillan or Jeremy Bernard to go and have plenty of success in that offense. There's plenty of room. We always say there's only one ball and a lot of mouths to feed. This offense is good at feeding a lot of mouths. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, who was great on screens and stuff last year too, I think has primed for a really big jump in production this season. And it's a great opportunity for him, knowing that all of the attention is still going to go largely to DK and Tyler.
Well, and I think short routes. 73% of his targets were short routes. Between 0 and 9 yards or behind the line of scrimmage, and the Broncos were 31st in the short passing defense. So I mean, that just kind of tailor-made for the short route. You're right. While there's one ball, you can feed the 3 mouths of the receivers that Seattle has, and you may attack short with Smith and Jigba. I think that's probably the way to go. We'll see.
I think the biggest key for that, Dad, and one of the things that could skew in his favor is what the health ends up like being on this offensive line right now. They've been down at right tackle a little bit. We know Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas were both injured for times last year, and that offense completely sputtered when all of a sudden the protection on the perimeter was short for Geno Smith. And so if that group's compromised at all, then kind of like we saw with Lamar Jackson last night, the offense getting the ball out of his hands a lot quicker, aiming more for around the lines of scrimmage. If that becomes the case, then Jackson Smith and Jigba and his skill set start to fit into that pretty well.
That team's an enigma to me because I don't know what Geno Smith is going to do. They have strength at wide receiver. The O-line is a question mark. So you're right, and I'm not sure about the defense as they continue to tinker with it. So they're kind of one of those, I'm not sure. Would I be surprised if they do well? No. Would I be surprised if they were average? No. They're a tough team for me to get a handle on.
Yeah, they are. I am one that tends to believe I think Geno Smith is going to do really well in this offensive system. I think the offensive line is understandably concerned because they had a really good offensive line at UW last year. They won the Joe Moore Award for the best unit in college football, but this is also a scheme that's going to give them opportunities to be athletes in space, move around in a way that helps them. Schematically, Ryan Grubb and what he does pre-snap, all of the motion shifts and the things that we've lauded the Chiefs for over the years, those are in his bag, and those can be things that help that group up front. I think Geno fits really well into this offense, playing point guard there with all those weapons. I'm excited for that. Jesse, let's get to one more here. And can we skip ahead and go to Caleb Williams and the Bears for this weekend and take a look at what they've got coming up?
Yeah, so we expect to see Caleb Williams on the run in this one, but Titans were the second best defense last season against the QB scrambles. So do you feel like you're going to need to see Caleb Williams use his arm in this one?
Yeah, Dad, I think overall that's got to be the hope for Bears fans, right? As we saw in the preseason, there was some of the playmaking out of structure, and some of that, was the coaching staff trying to put him in those positions. Get him on boots, get him out of the pocket, get him in a place where there are a bit fewer reads and he can go and cut it loose, and then also make some of those special extracurricular plays that we saw. So I believe he's capable of both, and for this Titans team, we know it's an entirely new-look defense with Anthony Weaver coming down there as the defensive coordinator.
But listen, what Anthony Weaver had done under Mike McDonald, I like the direction or where I think this defense go, which was always a tough defense with Mike Vrabel. So one of the most anticipated starts we've seen in a while with the number 1 pick in Caleb Williams to this improved on paper Chicago team where everybody is even our own Stu Gotts picked them to go to the Super Bowl to play the Jets, though it's Stu Gotts, so you got to take that with a grain of salt. But it's such an anticipated look of Caleb not only throwing from the pocket, but his escapability was wowing people in the preseason. And is that something that he can continue to do? Because you go back to the Notre Dame game where all of a sudden it was interception after interception and bad play after bad play on scrambling, but he was doing well at this level. So I think he has the weapons, but this defense, don't sell this Tennessee defense short. I still think they're going to be a really, really tough out.
By the way, Denard Wilson was the former Ravens coach that is now the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. I had Anthony Weaver on the brain the other day from talking to Javon Holland there. And I think to that point, Dad, one of the important things that I'm keeping an eye on in this game, Tennessee was 30th in the NFL in pass defense last year without blitzing. One of the things that this defensive structure can do well is all those simulated pressures we talked about. The Ravens technically didn't blitz a lot last year, even though they threw bodies at you from all over the place. So maybe that slight tweak in the model for a Tennessee team that still has great pass rushers like Jeffrey Simmons up front can go and give them that advantage that they were missing last year. This is just a little taste, as Trey Wingo said yesterday, and a Mooj Boost. Coming up next, let's get to the full main course for our first Sunday slate of NFL games on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. First NFL Sunday coming up, guys. We did it. Let's get right to it. Do a full preview. I'll tee you guys up with a few questions. You hit me with which team or game comes to mind here. So let's start with an easy one as I turn to face you guys on this giant screen. It was very dramatic. Which game is a potential playoff preview, do you think? Or like if NFC, AFC, a potential matchup featuring two playoff teams. What do we think?
Yeah, I would say, you could sell as a potential Super Bowl matchup with some of these teams here if you believe richly or reckless like Stu Gatz and how you pick the Super Bowl. But, Dad, either way, we know we have, last night was a matchup of a playoff rematch in the AFC Championship game. And then your game coming up on Sunday Night Football, the last game of the season for the the Los Angeles Rams, who lost to the Detroit Lions in the wild card round of the playoffs last season. So we've got two there that stand out, but I think the one for a lot of people that's going to be an interesting litmus test in the ways that we've talked about all offseason is Cowboys at Browns, right? In so many ways, the quarterback's very different focus is Dak Prescott, can I say, walking into this game. An absolutely remarkable troll of the entire situation in Dallas. I want to pull up the quote I saw from him the other day as we were getting ready for this game, because obviously his contract situation, Jerry Jones had come out and said something else recently about Dak Prescott and the future of this situation. And Dak just continues to deal with this in the media in a way that all right, here it is. Several Cowboys receivers, including CeeDee Lamb, have talked about working out at Dak Prescott's house in the offseason and the valuable work they were able to get in there on this turf. Prescott said he for sure thought he had gotten a return on that investment. This following the quotes from Jerry Jones that came out in an interview with Stephen A. Smith, where he talked about the return on investment with Dak Prescott and having to already think about the money you paid last time around and the money you're going to have to pay after that. So I just think that the way he continues to position himself reeks of a guy who's pretty confident going into this season with the work that he's put in, with the guys that he's got around him. We talk about the effects that these contract disputes can sometimes have on guys. There's a reason guys want to get it done before the season so that it's not hanging over your head. Dak seems really comfortable in the fire right now, and that has me excited going into this matchup where, hey, Myles Garrett on a rookie left tackle doesn't feel like a good time after we just saw Chris Jones hunting for dudes last night.
Yeah, I think Dak is handling this situation and all the press on him and Jerry Jones. I think he's handling it incredibly well. I really do. And this is a game in Cleveland where that offense, that Dallas offense, and as you know, I've said I think they take a step back against arguably the best defense that's going to be in the league this year. So a hell of a matchup right out of the gate, without question. But answering the question that Jesse asked, I'm going to look at the game I'm calling, Rams at Detroit. I mean, I just think that they met in the wild card last year. It's 24-23 Detroit win. Obviously, no Aaron Donald anymore for the Rams, but so much firepower on offense. But Detroit's firepower on offense were 16 games of over 325 yards, 14 games over 20 points. I mean, Ben Johnson has just been a guy who had head coaching opportunities, decided to stay with Detroit and be their offensive coordinator. Now, Sam Laporte is dealing with a little bit of a hammy. We'll see how much that affects him. But the weapons that they have, as opposed to the weapons the Rams have of Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp and Tutu Atwell, and obviously Kyron Williams and Blake Corum to come in to spell them. I mean, these are two powerfully built offensive teams that we need to see where the defenses are. As I said, no more Aaron Donald on defense, but young, talented Verse and Fisk they get, obviously with Kobe Turner, and what he's done in the middle of that defense has been very, very impressive. So younger defense, especially up front. Aiden Hutchinson is making a case to be a defensive player of the year. Still looking for a little bit of help on that D-line, though they bring in DJ Reader to help, again, stop against the run, redo their secondary. So this one, while these are two powerful offenses, I look at the defenses that it's some of the changes and new faces that they have on both these different defenses.
I still can't get over for the Rams defense. And that's really going to be the key, right? Because early in the season, we always talk about, too, hey, some of these teams that are more playoff inclined, and the Lions at this point have earned the right to think about themselves as a Super Bowl contender and a team that is going to structure their season as such, where before Dan Campbell was in program building mode. It was like you see in college where it's culture, it's going out here and trying to get over the hump in all these close games. Talent-wise, they're supposed to win a lot of these now. And so, man, if you don't have to show a lot at the beginning of the season, it kind of behooves you. And if you look at this defense now, this Rams defense, who, remember, Ernest Jones, their linebacker, who was the heartbeat of that defense, now does not live there anymore. Troy Reader is the green dot on that defense after losing their communicator in the middle of that incredibly young group. And so that, first and foremost, I mean, we see the NFC as a run and stop the run side of football right now. And so if the Lions don't have to take their foot off the gas and just handing the ball off over and over and over again, that's where it's going to be interesting. Heard a lot of good stuff from Jordan Rodriguez, who covers that team for The Athletic, about Braden Fisk. Kobe Turner, we know, made a big name for himself last year. But, man, that Lions offensive line, we heard Jim Harbaugh talk about, we think O-linemen are weapons.
Yeah.
Detroit is capital of the free world when it comes to believing that.
I mean, you talk about youth. Kobe Turner, now he led all rookies in sacks last year with 9. He's in his second year. Braden Fisk is in his first year. Byron Young at linebacker is in his second year. He had 8 sacks, tied for second amongst rookies. Omar Spates is a rookie linebacker. Jared Verse is a rookie linebacker. So there is a lot of youth in that front 7 going up against a very, very veteran offensive line in Detroit.
So that game, Dan, I know you can't pick because you're calling it there. The Rams plus 4.5 against Detroit, I think is a bad matchup early on. I would take Detroit in the points for this. And I've been high on the Rams as anyone this offseason.
Yep.
I just think that with all of that turnover defensively and all the injury offensively there, we're talking about a team, especially on the perimeter right now, that offensive line maybe a little bit banged up. So I worry about that. I would take the Lions minus 4.5 in this game. For the Dallas Cowboys and Browns game, Dad, Dallas plus 2.5 on the road seems like the play for me. I still think we've talked a lot about Tyler Guyton at left tackle. Hey, that matchup with Myles Garrett, not going to be a great time. He's going to have to take his lumps in that one, even though I think he's a talented player. On the other side, though, again, I will keep going back to this until I'm blue in the face. Big-time coaching change for Cleveland, losing Bill Callahan as the offensive line coach. And then Jack Conklin, Jedrick Wills, and even DeJuan Jones all coming back off a knee injury, facing Micah Parsons on the edge of that Dallas defense is nothing to shake a stick at either. And by the way, Deshaun Watson not playing anywhere close to the level of quarterback we've seen from Dak.
Yeah.
So I'll take Dallas in the points in that game.
Yeah, I do love Cleveland's secondary. I love their defense and obviously their secondary. To kind of keep the score down, but I'm with you. I'm not sure how much Cleveland can score. Remember, Nick Chubb is out for at least 4 games. Jerome Ford, who basically 70% of the time was an outside runner. You have Njoku, who had a monster year last year with the 5 quarterbacks that played. Amari Cooper as well. But that O-line does kind of worry me, coming off injuries, coming off of a new coach. But they are at home. I think I'm going to go with the Browns in this one. I'm shaky on this one at best, but I think I'm going to go with the Browns. And you're right. I cannot pick the Rams and the Lions.
Over-under in this one, 41, might be just low enough for me to think the over, even though, like we said, the defenses are going to be the sell in this one. But that is pretty damn low in this. I probably would stay away from that one. I think for me, the points play is probably the way to go there. But either way, if we're talking about players coming back from injury, Jesse, why don't we zoom out the lens a little bit on that then, looking around the rest of the league?
Yeah, so let's take a look at some games where you got somebody returning from injury, someone you might be interested in. For me, I'm looking at Joe Burrow. I mean, all eyes on this Ken's job is to not get hurt.
Yeah.
Yes, and that team's job is to keep their Ken from not getting hurt. And, Dad, I feel like a broken record bringing this up, but what we saw last night with Lamar Jackson and new parts on that offensive line. The Ravens had those issues. The Bengals in that division need to look at this as an opportunity in the early going. So I think that side of the ball for them, can they keep Joe Burrow, their Ken upright, certainly important against the New England Patriots team where that defense is still going to be very good, Dad, but we know that front taking a hit with Christian Barmore dealing with his, obviously, ailments that are going to affect the start of his season there. No more Matthew Judon, who is at least their most accomplished pass rusher at this point going up for that group. But I look at the other side of the ball for them still, Dad, and say this Bengals defense needs to come out and put the clamps on a Patriots offense that showed no signs of life in the preseason and should be a good place for them, that Cincinnati defense, to get back under Lou Anarumo to what we had a couple of years ago.
Yeah, we know the offense has firepower in Cincinnati. It's definitely going to be the defense. Can they keep scores down? And you should be able to keep the score down on this New England defense. I agree. This is a definite test of what should happen. We'll see what will happen. For me, as far as the quarterbacks coming back from injury, I go to the one with the least amount of experience. You got Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Kirk Cousins, Justin Herbert, Daniel Jones, all. Daniel Jones with the least amount of playing time, but still, he's been a starter for a couple of years. I look at Anthony Richardson. Now, while he's had a lot of time to rehab because he got hurt after 4 games, so he had, a lot of the season to rehab and then the offseason. But we know he had 4 rushing touchdowns, in 4 games. He was starting out pretty well. We know he is just a man amongst boys as far as size is concerned when he runs. So I'm interested to see how he comes out of the gate against the Texans. So I'm and the Texans, we know everybody's picking them to win the division, but the hell of a defense led by the rush end Will Anderson. I'm excited to see what he does after just 4 games and all the potential that we saw. Then it was shut down, and now under live fire again to see how he comes out.
Yeah, listen, the sexiest matchups of the weekend are no doubt Anthony Richardson there, who Texans are 3-point road favorites. I'm inclined to take that, even though running and stopping the run against this Indianapolis Colts team, an interesting matchup because that's the one thing the Texans struggled with offensively themselves, and then defensively, especially in the red zone, giving up rushing yards was something that haunted them, and that's where Anthony Richardson benefits you the most. Having a mobile quarterback and an offensive line that return to form when you're down in the red zone is the easiest way to simplify the equation there. I still like the Texans -3. I just think there's too much firepower under the hood. Daniel Jones coming back from injury, obviously his future a big sell. Justin Herbert and that new look team. Kirk Cousins and the Falcons are obviously going to be a huge part of this. But Dan, am I allowed to say that I'm really excited to watch Kyler Murray this weekend? Like, I don't think they're going to win. They're 6.5-point dogs on the road against the Bills. And I think that Cardinals defense is just too far away to party right now. And I would take the Bills and the points there. But this offense, now that you've got Marvin Harrison Jr. and the way that Kyler Murray looked at the end of last season, statistically isn't going to jump off the page for anyone. Didn't go over 300 yards passing in any of those games at the end of the year. Finished up with, I think, 262 passing yards in a loss against Seattle at the end of the season. But we've heard nothing but good things about his preparation and his mindset going into the season. And now that their best weapon isn't just Trey McBride, I do want to see what this next step can look like for a team that was just sort of the tough out potential landmine last year.
Boy, it doesn't seem that long ago we were talking about Kyler Murray and his extension, the clause in his contract that he had to spend time watching film and that whole brouhaha and how crazy that was, to now that talk of how he's preparing. And you're right, having another weapon outside of your tight end, Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr., many think he could be the offensive rookie of the year, given enough targets, and he should have enough targets to Kyler Murray, which they don't have a ton of a running game, and the O-line can be a question mark, but I am looking forward to Kyler and Marvin and that connection.
Well, I am looking forward to that as well. And since we've got rookies on the brain, Jesse, let's cash or trash some rookie goodness this weekend.
Yeah, so Cash It or Trash It is presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. So yeah, let's stick to it. Any rookie QB props jump out to you that you want to cash or trash, fellas?
Boy, Dad, I know you're going to be all over it, and you've been talking about this team a lot more than I have, so this feels like stolen valor from me, and I get it's the highest of the three. Jaden Daniels over 37.5 rush yards. Just knowing what a dynamic rusher he is, all three of these guys can certainly make plays with their legs. We saw Caleb Williams do it in the preseason, as did Bo Nix. But I think the latter two, because they're not as dynamic of athletes as Jaden Daniels, more inclined to do that with the mind of throwing it downfield. Jaden Daniels, while we laud the processing there, it's that fine line for Cliff Kingsbury of not wanting to coach him out of the gifts that make him unique. And that ability to turn it loose in the open field, you just need to hit one. So Jaden Daniels over 37.5 rushing yards seems like, for me, the layup going into this week against this Buccaneers defense.
Oh, I absolutely agree. No matter how smooth you think a rookie quarterback is, one that can run is still in the process of trusting their legs more than their arm when everything goes to hell in a handbasket. And we know Jaden can run. I mean, he's an incredible runner, throws the ball well, obviously, but is an incredible runner. That to me, I agree. That's the easy one to pick. So I'll look for a more difficult one. You know, the Titans defense, again, we think, how much has it changed? Is it staying the same? Can Caleb get over 242 passing yards? I tend to lead with Bo Nix over 202 passing yards against Seattle, because I'm not sure of the defense. Now, it doesn't. Cortland Sutton's got to throw to, but not a ton of weapons to throw to. But I don't know. I just see Bo as a bit of a playmaker, with Sean Payton kind of leading the way there. I like him for over 202.5 yards.
That would be the only one that I touch. I think the Caleb Williams 242 is a little bit ambitious, especially rookie quarterback making his first regular season start, a defense that is changing shape a bit in Tennessee. There's just a lot of unknown there. And that goes both ways, right? We see this with rookies where, before guys get a ton of film on them at this level, can have somewhat of an advantage. But I would be staying away from that one with Caleb Williams. I'm sure that's juiced towards the under with him. For Bo Nix, that one is interesting. I think Bo Nix over 1.5 touchdowns would be interesting. You can get that at plus 185, and that one a little less predicated on yardage. But if that rushing attack with Javonte Williams and that deep running back room could get them any sort of headway in that game against the Seattle defense that has a bunch of talented parts, but has to go out and show that, hey, it's more than just, Mike McDonald's here, and so the problem solved this season. That could be an interesting one. You get him in range. He makes some good decisions. Sean Payton is an excellent play caller, which helps down in that area. So, Dad, are there any of the other games in terms of this weekend that we haven't gotten to yet that you'd like to pile onto there? Jags at Dolphins, certainly up there in that group that could be talked about there. Raiders-Chargers, for me, is probably the most interesting one, just because, again, it's a litmus test of team building in the NFL. It's all these hypotheticals worn into one, where it's quarterback against the world on one side, roster against the world on the other for the Las Vegas Raiders. I know you've been leaning Raiders all offseason, but man, something about this Chargers team, the minute they announced that a 300-pound ginger was playing fullback for them, is just going to be too much for me to pass up.
That's going to be an intriguing game, with between the quarterback of Minshew and Aiden O'Connell to Jim Harbaugh leading the Chargers, into what kind of team do we have. Panthers and Saints, for the players' perspective, I hope it's a good game, because everybody is looking at that as the blah game of the weekend, but I hope it's an exciting game for the players. As far as an upset, I'm going to go with Washington over Tampa Bay. You know, Dan Quinn running that defense, or you know, being the coach there and taking over that defense, I think is going to help that Washington defense against Baker Mayfield and that Buccaneer Mike Evans and that Buccaneer offense. And I'm excited to see Jaden Daniels and that offense perform. So that's the upset I'm going to pick.
God, we're going to do Buccaneers disrespect all again this year, aren't we? We did it last year. We left them for dead. We're all picking against them in the division now, and we're just going to do it again. And the more and more we do this, I'm like, man, Baker Mayfield and the Bucs are going to end up winning this division again. Like, again, things have changed over there. Dave Canales doesn't live there anymore. It's a new coordinator with Liam Cohen. But, again, it's a combination of people I like and a team that just seems to thrive on disrespect like this. So we've all done it. Folks in Tampa, congratulations. You've gotten what you wanted again, which is the national media all doubting your football team. And now they've got the opportunity to go out there and surprise in an infinitely winnable division. So in a way, I feel like we've helped you guys out, and you shouldn't be that mad that none of us want to pick your football team to win games. Even my dad, who's picking a rookie on a team that is potentially dancing with the Giants for capital B bad in that division. Coming up next, we'll look at more underdogs that might have a chance to pop this weekend with our bud Peter Keating from Underdogs next on GoJo and Golic. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield. We got football fever. Week 1 already raring and going. The Thursday night game was fantastic last night. We've got Friday night football in Brazil, which is a wild sentence to say when it's talking about American football, before we get to the Sunday slate of games this weekend. And so for more help on that right now, Peter Keating, one of the co-hosts of Underdogs here at Meadowlark Media and the DraftKings Network with our buddy Jordan Brenner, kind enough to join us now. And Peter, heading into these weekends, I'm curious from your standpoint, you guys do so much good work and research looking into some of the underdogs that could potentially win. How difficult is it with the lack of information going into week 1 and the lack of sample size of the season?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm glad I could connect. I was worried we'd have some problems because I didn't want to get caught in an illegal formation after watching last night's game.
Oh, well played.
But I'm here. I'm lined up properly. Look, let me tell you something. Here's what's an even bigger problem, okay, in making predictions going into the season. Everybody is so optimistic. Look at everybody's forecast for the season. You'll see this, them always say, well, this guy had 7,000 touchdowns and 9,000 interceptions last year, but he could turn it around. Or he was injured, but maybe he won't be injured again. I guarantee you, if you add up everybody's win totals in most of the preseason projections, you get a total of more wins than are actually possible in a season of football, because nobody ever says, oh, this guy could break his toe. and they could have a lousy year, right? So you have to tone that down. Everybody has expectations. And then the other thing is, this is going to sound weird, but sometimes you have to not focus so much on the talent and the things that are under teams' control, which is very hard for athletes and analysts, and especially athletes who become analysts, to do. And you kind of have to focus on what went wrong that was out of control, out of teams' control last year, and how that might bounce back to be more normal. So we actually found some teams where I think the public and the betting lines haven't caught up to the fact that they're due to improve, even if they had done nothing at all, right? So it's like they just had terrible luck or terrible injury luck, or they have a better schedule this year, or they're in a weak division. Stuff like that adds up to being maybe not more, it's not more important than talent, but it's sometimes more predictable than whether someone's going to have a way better year or a way worse year. Does that make sense?
So yeah, it does. And listen, we see it every year with teams that don't make the playoffs that make the playoffs next year, and vice versa. So which are the unlikely teams that are most likely to win a division or make the playoffs? And let's take Cincinnati out of it, because with Joe Burrow back, obviously they're more than likely a playoff team.
Yeah, that's an interesting case. Look, there are teams that I think everyone thinks are bound to improve that are in this category, like the Bears or the Jets. You just see them adding talent. But there are teams that could do way better than people expect for reasons that aren't being appreciated yet. And number one on our list is probably Arizona. Arizona had bad injury luck last year. They didn't win as many games as they should. And they weren't as bad as people think when Kyler Murray was healthy. Last year, we did a segment about how Arizona could be favored to lose every single game last year. We tried to find an award winner on the roster, and I think I picked VJ Ojolari as plus 3,000 to win NFC Defensive Player of the Year as a rookie, just because they had gotten rid of all the talented players on the roster. Yet they weren't horrible. Murray's back. Marvin Harrison is great, and their over/under is still, I think, either 6.5 or 7.5. They could be, and sometimes when you look for underdogs, you got to go value picking, right? You got to go bargain basement or build shopping, right? They could easily win 7 or 8 or even more games. They're getting to be in that middle of the mix where if things break right, they could suddenly look way better than you expected. And I'll give you one more. They're not going to be good, but Carolina is going to be better than you expect. Carolina was decimated by injuries last year. They play in a weak division. They signed good free agents like Deontay Johnson, and Bryce Young isn't going to be that bad again. And if you look last year, again and again and again, they lost a bunch of close, heartbreaking, crazy bounce games. The Balls just due to bounce their way more often this season, and the whole young group is going to be a year older and better, we think.
You mentioned injury luck there. I mean, turnover luck's another one of those things, right? You guys would look at and say is a huge bounce back factor?
Yes. Look, you can train teams to not fumble the ball, but it's very hard for anybody to train well enough to recover fumbles once they're in the mix. So fumbles should be a 50-50 split. When you see teams winning a lot of 50-50 splits, whether it's fumbles or catchable passes, that's not really sustainable. And Carolina is due to be better there as well.
Carolina, by the way, at DraftKings Sportsbook, the win total 5.5 right now. So I'm with you. Carolina winning 6 games this year, to me, does not seem out of the realm of possibility, given that division, given what you mentioned about the bad luck from last year, and then you combine that with an influx of talent. It might not be the highest end. They may have had to overpay for a lot of the guys on that roster, but I'm with you. You combine those two factors, Peter, and it seems like that they are ripe for that moment.
If you're not rating GMs, if you don't care how much draft capital they gave up to get Bryce Young, if you don't care that they now have to overpay to get free agents, you're just looking at who could be a little better than you expect. Minnesota is another one of those teams. It's like, they were really lucky 2 years ago, so nobody really appreciated how unlucky they were last year. You're going from Kirk Cousins to Sam Darnold, so everyone's kind of depressed and underrating them, but there's a load of talent on defense. Aaron Jones is a perfect fit. It's not going to be pretty, but if they're an over-under of 6.5, they could win 7 games. It's a brutal schedule, so I'm not going to say they're the best shot, but just what you said, which is you don't have to look good. You just have to stop the penny from coming up tails all the time to do a little bit better than people expect.
So how about the fun of picking week 1 games and underdogs? You have the biggest underdog is the Patriots at 8.5. Cardinals are 6.5 point dogs to Buffalo. Denver 6 point dogs to Seattle. Do you see a heavily underdog team pulling out a victory in week 1?
First of all, I all of these indicators sometimes say you should zag when everyone else zigs. I am not going to be contrarian about chance of going 0-17 than making a lot of these, under the, I do not. Sometimes teams are just bad. They're not underdogs. You know what I mean? Having said that, Arizona is a really interesting pick this first week against. Lost a lot of talent defense. They're expecting us to step up who haven't stepped up before. They lost their top 2 receivers. I know Josh Allen is a very, very viable MVP candidate, but what a statement game it would be if Arizona were to win this game. And that's a lot of points. That's a lot of points to the game. I'll tell you this. I mean, the heat's on Buffalo, right? If Buffalo were to lose this game, those fans will be out of their mind. And sometimes that makes a difference. If you're thinking you have to play in order for everybody's worst fears about you not to be validated, that is not a great situation to be in. I like Arizona a lot better than I like Denver and New England as a pick this week.
I'm with you on that. We were just talking in the last segment about the Cardinals and some of the upside, especially for this offense. So it's nice to see it validated by someone that is doing a lot better job of their homework and showing their work than I am here. Peter, you can we always appreciate your time around here. Everyone, you can check out Peter, Jordan, the Underdogs, doing great work here on Meadowlark and the DraftKings Network. Thank you so much, and we look forward to talking to you again. Thank you for lining up the right way with us this morning.
Thank you. Anytime. It's a huge pleasure. It's great to talk with you guys. And I'll say this. I don't think Pittsburgh should be an underdog against Cincinnati in the college game this weekend. Pitt had looked terrible last year. But, I want to bring up one thing. If you can't recruit great talent, you can now sign great talent. And they got a transfer from Alabama who can recruit, who looks like the real deal at quarterback. And they smoked. Look, I know it's just Kent State, but they smoked them last week. And Pitt +2 against Cincinnati is a kind of cool college bet, too.
Ooh, okay.
Wow,
Sprinkling that on the way out here. Don't hate, man. And you're talking about
I owed you one because I picked Texas A&M against Notre Dame last week, and I wanted to come on and make amends for that to both of you. So, there's a college pick.
Yeah.
It takes a big man to admit when they were wrong and an even bigger man to bring a gift to honor that situation, Peter. That's why you're the best. We appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you, guys.
Dad, he's right about that Buffalo Bills opportunity, by the way, too, because after last night, I do think that premium on the Bills offensive line is something that's going to be huge for them heading into this season, especially in the early going, trying to replace all that talent. But coming up next, let's stick with college and the one other big matchup we didn't quite get to this last week on GoJo and Golic. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield. It's been a morning around here, guys. Shout out to our great staff here at GoJo and Golic. We've got people in 3 different places right now. I got to Reno, Nevada. I'm calling the Georgia Southern at Nevada game on Saturday night on True TV that you guys can check out. Got in last night about 11 o'clock and found out my hotel room was booked for the wrong day. Had to go down the street. Ended up getting about 2 hours of sleep on that. Woke up this morning and all of the equipment I brought didn't work here. And the best part is the reason it was so difficult to come by hotel rooms here last night was the fact that, one, they've got the folks coming back from Burning Man apparently making their way through the city. And there is the world's largest free hot air balloon festival that goes on in Reno that has chock full of hotel room. And it gave me the chance to explain to Dad and Jesse what lunars were.
Yeah.
In a way that
Google at your own risk what lunars are. But I have a quick question for you guys. How much money would I have to pay you to go to Burning Man? Because to me, that sounds like truly the worst thing ever.
Well, wasn't Burning Man the one last year where they all got stuck because of the weather that rolled out there? And so they were in this like Mad Max Fury Road style hellscape?
Yes. But I think to me, it sounds like an insufferable hellscape even without the weather thing.
I would agree. It would be cool to see the statue on fire. And I guess most of these festivals are just about how much drugs you want to do, which for me is very little. That's not something I'm super comfy with, but to each their own. That's just not my bag. So I would be much more inclined to maybe try and do something like Stagecoach or go to Coachella or something like that, where you're not fully out and remote from everybody. You're still staying in like somebody's nice parents' house in Palm Springs while you go and do that.
Yeah, I could do that. I can't stay in a tent. Not going to do that.
All right, and then my dad's over there having technical difficulties right now. He's back in Kansas City, and he is in a hotel room with 8 people from our crew that were out there for the show that are all there for tech support, and he cannot hear, see, or talk to us right now, which is good because it gives me the floor to talk about this then as we look at what we got yesterday out of the NCAA. This was, I thought, really interesting. I've tried to stay away from doing too much of the court stuff with House versus the NCAA and what's going to come next in college football, just because I understand it's football season. We're excited about the games, and I don't want this to detract from that too much. But I do think it's important every once in a while to raise our hand and remind people what's going on here, because yesterday kind of felt like a big moment. As we had talked about the settlement that, for anyone that had missed it, basically had us on the cusp of pay for play coming to college football actually paid out by the schools. Right now, it's all of this NIL money from collectives that are third-party clubs there. Dad, quiet yourself right now. You're in my ears. Shh. Shut your mouth. I'm trying to talk about college football. Anyway, so the collectives right now pay players in a way that is truly pay for play, even though none of them want to admit it. This House ruling and the potential settlement that comes from it would have brought that money and the television dollars into a true revenue split format like we have in the pros. And the judge, in this case, U.S. District Court Judge Claudia Wilkin of the Northern District of California, basically looked at the settlement proposal that would prevent outside collectives from supplementing income from these players. So you'd have Title IX regulating a lot of this, what's coming out from the schools, and the thought that, hey, football and basketball players might not be able to get paid more or nearly as much as they're paid now, and rightly looked at that and said, hey, that's kind of FUBAR. You guys need to go back and do better. She apparently had come into that meeting thinking that that had actually been taken out of it because it made such little sense to her that you would willingly thwart the market value of these players in the way that the NCAA was trying to do. So I'm glad this justifies the way my antennas, Jesse, were up on this last time around. You're a former college athlete. What we heard was basically the NCAA trying to take back control of this and put a bit of a governor on spending in a way that just never felt fair. We had had players get all these rights finally after so long, and now the market will eventually take care of itself, I think, when you have enough cautionary tales. But in the meantime, the NCAA, who's been banging on the desk for guardrails for so long, was getting ready to overcorrect in a way that always, to me, felt a little bit uncomfortable, and I said so. And it's nice to hear that a judge agrees.
The floor's already been opened with, like, the collectives and everything. Like, you can't go back. Like, we've already gone in this direction. You can't go back. Like you said, it seemed like an overcorrection. And the judge literally said, go back to the drawing board. So I think she meant, like, this is crap. This is all crap. Go back, figure out the whole thing again. So it sounds like it's going to be a pretty long road from here. I mean, don't you think? One of the coaches said, like, there's no reason to settle under these circumstances. Go to trial and take our chances on appeal. Yeah. So could we see this thing go to trial? That would be truly insane.
I pray to God. I think we've got Dad back with us now, too. But just seeing, again, the way these courts and lawmakers have all consistently just looked at the NCAA and been like, no, this is hot garbage, and you know you guys have been living wrong. Dad, if this thing goes to trial, I don't know how they can have any confidence.
Well, if it goes to trial and you say go to a trial to take our chances on an appeal, how long is that going to take? I mean, you're talking about trying to find answers. You have just extended this for years. If you go the route of trial just to get to an appeal, to go through a trial first to get to an appeal, it is an absolute mess that all the adults, have all gotten themselves into and all need to look in the mirror for.
Well, they just couldn't help themselves. Like, they were getting back to a point where they were going to have a little bit more control. And you were going to have this, 22% revenue split that was going to go amongst all the sports. And the ease and concession would have been, hey, we're going to do this so we can have a little bit more control baseline of a lot of what's going on. And then these collectives that we can put even more of an arm around are going to come in and be able to supplement that for the sports that people know they really want to spend money on, like football and basketball. College athletics and the history of these sports have always found a way to get money in the hands of the people that they deem valuable. And they were always going to find a way to get money back into the hands of the football and basketball players to pay for $20 million rosters like Ohio State. So this, to me, once again, is just this group of people, Dad, that failed to have any foresight. Now, in hindsight, still can't help themselves in wanting to grip the wheel too tightly when it comes to the future of the sports.
It is an absolute mess. We keep wondering where it's all going to be in the near future and the distant future. And it's now, we thought we had a path, but now the path just has a bunch of prongs and a bunch of mud puddles and a bunch of clouds. And we have no idea where it's going to go.
I heard Mike Ryan talking about this with Pablo Torre. Mike Ryan, the executive producer, long time of the Dan Le Batard show, and noted Miami Canes donor who, listen, has a very selfish vested interest in wanting to not see this come up this way, because Miami's been one of the teams that's gone out here and spent like this. But I do think his overall point that, and this has always been the point for anyone who's supported this, is the market was always going to take care of itself. Like, hey, if you have enough instances where Florida State, if they end up truly getting burned by going out and getting DJ Uiagalelei, I don't know how much they ended up paying with them. These contracts still aren't public in the way their NFL counterparts are.
Right.
But if you have enough teams that go out here and realize, hey, we're not in a position to overspend on this the way like Ohio State. Hell, maybe even if Ohio State doesn't steamroll to a national championship this year, and their donors say, are we really going to spend $20 million on a roster every year? I know we talked to Andy Staples, who said this is still chump change compared to NFL rosters, and these people have deep pockets. But that stuff, in my mind, Dad, was always going to end up regulating itself just like every other market does.
Oh, I completely agree. And the bottom line is, with money going up, we keep bringing up Ohio State and $20 million. I go right to what Nick Saban said in his first appearance on College Game Day. Well, if you don't spend it on the right people, it doesn't mean blank. And, that's the other thing. That's why schools are hiring, GMs, to study the landscape of the portal and what you pay and who you pay. And it is becoming just like the NFL and bringing in a free agent. Was the free agent in the NFL worth the money that you spent? And sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. And it's the same thing now in college.
Buddy, you don't even have to put quotes around GM anymore. We got that story that broke on ESPN and all the other big networks that Courtney Morgan, Alabama's named GM, is making making $2.5 million over 3 years. So it's real. It's spectacular. It is here. And based on this judge's word, once again, it feels like it's not going anywhere anytime soon in the way the NCAA would like to see it happen. Coming up next, let's wrap it up, send you guys into week one with an all-timer deciding to hang up the cleats here on GoJo Golic. All right, guys, we're going to finish off this show the way we always do, get you into week one of the NFL with this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of the day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, Xumo Play, and DraftKingsNetwork.com. You miss us or any of our guests, thanks to Peter Keating from the Underdogs. You can check that out wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. It's been an adventure today. I'm excited to go see some hot air balloons after this. But in the meantime, guys, let's get to this, that, and the third and get to a big-time announcement yesterday from the world of women's professional soccer. Alex Morgan, longtime U.S. national team star, went to Twitter to announce her retirement and some other great news in a big way yesterday. Take a listen.
I'm going to get to the point quickly. I'm retiring. And I have so much clarity about this decision, and I'm so happy to be able to finally tell you. It has been a long time coming, and this decision wasn't easy. But at the beginning of 2024, I felt in my heart and soul that this was the last season that I would play soccer.
Dad, Alex Morgan, who has been a longtime legend of the U.S. women's soccer group here, 35 years old, didn't make it to the team that went to the Olympics this last time around, but is a two-time World Cup champion and Olympic gold medalist. She's 5th in U.S. women's national team history with 123 goals and scored in 224 caps. And also, oh, by the way, announced that in addition to saying she's going to play one more game on Sunday as the San Diego Wave FC host the North Carolina Courage, she's also pregnant and expecting their second child, which is awesome news. So going to be, I think, well celebrated for an incredible career. Someone who also impacted the game far beyond just the pitches. We know she was a big part of uncovering and bringing up all of the abuse allegations back in 2021 around the NWSL that led to some big sweeping changes there.
Yeah, I mean, what an incredible career. And obviously the exciting news is that she is pregnant with her second child, hence leading to her last game being on Sunday. And you heard her say at the beginning of the last season she had kind of thought this would be her last year. And we always talk about as athletes, once you start thinking about retirement, you know you're not a long way away from retiring when your head is just not in it 1,000% and it's kind of in your mind. So what a great career, a career that should and will be celebrated. One of the greatest to ever do it is hanging him up. But, you know, it'll be sad. You could tell she was kind of getting choked up. But, boy, you'll look back fondly on an incredible career.
I think you look at a lot of the U.S. women's national team that was the core of, most recent memory for us with her and Abby Wambach and all these women that had to do far more, Megan Rapinoe, that had to mean far more to their sport than just going out there and being able to be athletes, which is unfortunately a burden that's been unfairly placed on female athletes, especially to have to go out here and advocate themselves, to shine a light on things like the abuse that we saw happen there. And unfortunately, that has been far too baked into the model for women in sports. And so, Alex Morgan, all you can do is applaud the courage of the women who do understand that this is not fair and they should not have to deal with these things at a level that just does not happen to their male counterparts, but to be courageous enough to step into the light and do something about it so that themselves and others can have a better experience with the sport is just another part of an incredibly robust legacy, like we mentioned. So happy trails to her and congratulations on the retirement announcement and the expansion of her family. Jesse, let's get to this and more, or should I say that and more news. We've been doing a lot of first pitches around here lately, but this one went awry.
Yeah, first pitch, and continuing with the soccer theme. So the Washington Spirit going to be without one of their stars, Croy Bethune, due to a torn meniscus. So she apparently tore it during the first pitch that she threw out at a Nationals game when the Spirit gold medal winners were honored. She just won gold in Paris. So we talked about Luda yesterday, and we were like all in on the first pitch. Now we got first pitch leading to injury. So we ban it? What do we do? Come on, this sucks.
I am blown away by this, Dad. And she was up on the mound, it looked like here, sailed the pitch a bit. But you've done a lot more of these first pitches than I have here. We don't see her really pulling up after the fact, but this coming off the mound is something that a lot of people aren't prepared for, how to respond if they haven't done it before.
Yeah, and you couldn't really tell after the video if there was a slight limp or not, but I'm sure she was trying to play it off if it was painful. I mean, you don't want to sit there and grab your knee after a ceremonial first pitch, but, I mean, what a devastating injury. She was a third pick in the NWSL draft. In 17 games, she had 5 goals and 10 assists. I mean, and then to have her season end with a torn meniscus on a first pitch is so bizarre.
It sucks. Obviously, you feel for her in that extent. You wonder if this is something we see organizations all the time in sports ban certain off-season activities for their players. Motorcycles famously always the ones that come up. But skiing, stuff like that, do you have to add first pitch to the arsenal now?
No. I don't think you can. This has to be such a 1 in a million shot here. And she did. She sailed the pitch too. I was like, well, they say don't bounce it, sail it, and if you're gonna go one way or the other, sail it. And she did. But I would be hard pressed to think we're gonna ban first pitches because of this.
I will say, at least the silver lining of this is no one's going to make fun of a bad pitch when they know you got injured. Like now it's a sad story. Now it sucks. And so you're not going to get the 50-cent treatment where we look at a wild pitch and go, oh man, let's add you to the blooper reel for when this comes up. And Dad, I'll go back to your original point. I think much like getting beat deep on a pass or anything like that, if you have a bad first pitch, I would grab something. Grab a knee, grab a hammy, grab an elbow. Tell anyone who will listen that you'll have to have Tommy John after this, because that immediately absolves you of the bad pitch. And again, no one's going to slander you when they think that you're hurt.
Well, okay, they'll absolve you of the bad pitch, then mock you incessantly on getting hurt on a ceremonial first pitch. And that will last longer in my eyes, to be mocked forgetting that it was a bad pitch, which you get booed for, and I've been booed a couple of times. I bounced a couple in, but I couldn't fathom grabbing my arm or my knee and being like, wait a minute, you were an athlete and you got hurt throwing out a ceremonial pitch, with all due respect to Croy Bethune, I mean, who did get hurt doing it. That's a tough one to live down.
Should have stretched it out. Soft tissue injuries. Should have been stretching before she got out there.
Meniscus.
If you're going to learn one thing on this show, you're going to learn about some soft tissue injury out here. You're also going to learn about waiting before you tweet, Jesse. So let's get to the third and find someone else who learned a hard lesson.
Yeah, Twitter users had a little fun with the game last night and got a little petty, okay? Ravens were quick to tweet out touchdown on that final game of the play of the game. And obviously it wasn't a touchdown. And the community notes users were very quick to jump in and add the context of, no, it wasn't. So the Ravens kept the tweet up, you guys. Like, maybe they didn't agree with the call, so this was their way of, like, being defiant. I don't know. Maybe that's why they're keeping it up, but it's pretty funny to see.
I appreciate them living by the poster's code of, hey, we're going to leave it up. It's not like it was something slanderous. It was just something that makes them look kind of silly.
Right.
Community notes have gotten pretty savage, but I will say, Dad, the Ravens are still going to have to work a lot harder to clear the highest bar in the history of their organization's Twitter account, going back to 2017 when they went to play London and tweeted out that picture of Queen Elizabeth II with doctored Ravens face paint all over her face in still one of the funniest moments in sports Twitter history.
Yeah, that was a tough moment. But what do you do? Was it all right to leave that tweet up? You got to take it down, right? I mean, It was clearly not a touchdown. How are you defiant in keeping up something that is wrong?
Because they think it was maybe
wrong.
they think it was a touchdown. I don't know.
But it wasn't. I mean, it was so clearly not a touchdown.
That's just your opinion, man.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Don't even go off on the weekend starting like that.
Get to the Twitter streets. Yeah.
Think about this, guys. We've already got that much drama, and it was just night one. We got a full slate coming up this weekend that we hope you enjoy. We got a show here that'll be back Monday that we hope you enjoy. Download, subscribe, rate, review us. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you then.